This is a Rabble Podcast Network show. New voices in your head. It's Radio Free Radio.
Hi there, folks, and welcome to the Ruckus. We are a proud member of the Rabble Podcast Network. My name's Kevin McGowan, and I'm going to be your host as we wander around Canada talking to some of the greatest up-and-coming musicians in this country. In this, our first episode, actually, we're going to go off to New York City, and we're going to talk to Brenda Earle, who is an expat Canadian jazz singer and pianist and composer who's been living in the Big Apple for about 7 years. Also, we're going to head over to Toronto, where I'll chat with Simon Borer from Entire Cities. Now, they're a country music collective who mix up old school and new school country sounds. But to start things off, let's go to Halifax, Nova Scotia. Because anybody who knows anything about music in Canada knows about the Halifax music scene. Now, one of the latest and greatest up-and-comers from that city is Rebekah Higgs. She released her debut record in 2007, and it was produced by Thomas Ryder Payne, who you probably know from Joy Drop. Now, the CD was nominated for a few East Coast Music Awards this year, and of course her constant touring is slowly but surely building up a pretty solid national fan base. So we're going to talk to Rebekah right after we hear this track. Now, this song was in the top 10 on Much More Music for a good portion of the summer. Here's Rebekah Higgs and Parables. So I'll just jump right into it because I just got the CD yesterday, your new one.
Oh, yeah.
And I must say, I took it to work today, and it's rare that I can listen to any album like 5 times in a row. But I was curious about how you managed to put it all together, because the songs are very folky, but they're also very rich and textured with a lot of electronic elements and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
What's that recording process like for you?
Well, yeah, like for me, I think that I tend to be very sporadic and spontaneous when I record. So I'll say I had written something on the piano, or if I'd written it on the guitar, I would start with those instruments, and then I'd start singing, and then just kind of as I felt like it, I'd be like, oh, let's add this and let's add that, and thanks to Thomas, who I worked with on the album, he really understands that that's how I work. So he's just always ready with anything that I could possibly want to lay down. Like everything's just always plugged in and ready to go. And so we just kind of did a song a day, just building them as we sort of heard parts in it. And and that's kind of just how I've continued to record since then. I'm doing a bunch of new recordings and demos at the moment, and I always just kind of I usually play all the instruments, so for me it's just like I lay down a part and then I'm like, oh, I hear some violin, so then I'll pick up my violin, play some violin, and oh, I hear some vocal harmonies, so I'll do some harmonies. They're like, oh, we need some stomps and snaps and claps or something, or ukulele, so it just kind of, as I hear the parts, as I track each part, then I can sort of hear more, and so it ends up, just kind of building on itself.
Right. I mean, so you recorded one song a day, roughly? Like, so, you did your 12 hours and that was it, or did you revisit these things as you went through it?
No, like we pretty much did one song a day, and then at the end when we were mixing, at the end of all the recording, we mixed and if there was something that we thought, oh, we should have done this on them, then we would have. But for the most part, they were complete, and they were usually like 6 or 7 hour days. Because Thomas has little children, so we'd have responsibilities to put them to bed at night and get them up in the morning. So usually I'd arrive at around noon and we'd work till 6 and have dinner with the family, and then after dinner we'd go back down to the basement and finish off anything that we thought we could do, and then put the kids to bed and then be off. So yeah, so it's kind of.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun, actually. A very kind of nice home environment to record in.
Yeah. Oh, it was perfect. I mean, it was a great environment for me, and it was my first, recording experience, and it just made me fall in love with the whole process.
Right. I mean, you've had a pretty good year, though, since this record came out. I mean, you were nominated for 2 East Coast Music Awards.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, your Parables video has been in the top 10 on Much More Music, and, I mean, you're getting some really good exposure. What's your reaction to that?
I don't really notice it. I guess I just keep going. But I mean, it's always nice when you have people that acknowledge those things that have happened to you. I kind of just I really enjoy performing and really enjoy recording. And for me, it's just always about what's next and what can I do now and what am I sort of artistically craving, and I just keep going. So I guess it's just maybe fueling that fire a little bit. Just helps me to see that there is, that people appreciate it, and there's a good reason for me to make music. So just kind of continue on that path.
I'm the simple one. I've got happiness ringing through my ears. What more could a gal need but a few?
Well, I've been working out, I've been playing solo a lot recently, and it's kind of like a continual process for me to see, how I can add more instruments at once and do more layers and do more textures live and pull things off better. So for me, it's like there's always that challenge. I don't think it's really ever gotten boring for me because I always feel like there's something that could be better. So I'm continually trying to process and evolve and so. I really like that I've been that busy. I feel like I'm starting to get things together now after all the time. So.
I mean, I listened to some of the tracks from your Toronto show that was on CBC Radio 3.
Oh yes. That was a special occasion. That one was I just put together some friends from Toronto to play with me So it
Oh,
ended
wow.
up being like 7 people on stage with me, whereas when I play solo, with like my loop station and my chaos pad and my line 6 and my glockenspiel and my guitar and my microchord or whatever, and just kind of layer stuff and make a little show from, myself. Sometimes I'll do that and have a drummer, and then sometimes I will play with a band, which adds like a drums and a bass and like a synth player or a trumpet player or something, in addition to all the other stuff. So it's kind of, my band's a little bit, a revolving door, but for most of the time I'll play solo.
Anybody in particular that you'd like to be playing with, or do you prefer the solo you on stage?
I feel when because I did play everything on the album, I feel like when I play solo and I'm balancing and juggling a bunch of other things, it gives people the opportunity to see, where this album came from. And it just, I feel like people sort of are able to connect more to you when it's just you on the stage. I think that you're a little bit more vulnerable, you're a little bit more out there. When it's with the band, like, it might sound better as a whole, like on a recording or something like that, but you lose a little bit of the personality and like the things that really allow the audience to sort of feel like they're spying on you in a way, For the most part, I've just started touring solo because it was the easiest and most affordable. Like, I couldn't afford to take a band on the road with me anymore, so I had to be creative and figure out how to do it solo. And so that's why it's been a continual process of trying to figure out, how I'm going to pull off like this layered and textured album when I play live.
Right. I'm curious what you said about, when you're up there by yourself and it's like people are spying on you. How do you want your music to affect the people when you're performing like that?
I don't know. I think that my set usually takes people through a broad range of emotions. Like, I don't think it's just one thing, just because there's a lot of different feelings and different styles of songs, and so each one sort of has its own story. And I feel like I'm kind of constantly, I guess, telling the same story over and over again, but for me, it sort of always is coming from a different place, so it keeps it that freshness. And I try to leave things pretty open, so and the meanings and the lyrics to my songs kind of unnamed, so that people can kind of make up their own stories along with the songs, I guess, in a way. So, you just hope that you can, like, draw people in and that they'll kind of create something in their mind from it. Just encouraging imagination.
I also wanted to ask, you're in Halifax,
Mm-hmm.
or you're living in Halifax.
Yeah.
Have you any thoughts of, packing up and moving somewhere else? Is Halifax home?
Yeah, I feel like the internet has made the world so much smaller, and you don't necessarily need to live in a big city to get your music out there. And I really like being home, and I think that since I'm on the road most of the time, it's nice to come back to somewhere where it feels like home. I could easily live in Toronto or in Montreal, but I'm there so much anyway that I may as well.
I'm also curious about Halifax because I often read or hear about how the musical community in Halifax is very tight.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a truism, or is that kind of a myth of the Halifax
Oh,
music
no,
scene?
it's definitely true. Everybody in my band plays in like 5 other bands.
Okay.
Everybody is just kind of connected to everybody else in some way, and we all know each other, and there's a lot of support, and a lot of musicians come out to see other musicians play. So there's a lot of people that just support live music and creative music writing, and it's just nice to have that support, as well as really good musicianship to look up to, so that you can strive to make yourself better at the same time.
Now that was Rebekah Higgs. You can check out RebekahHiggs.com for more information on her. There's also links to her MySpace page, etc. And you can go to Zunior.com, that's Zunior.com, and buy her CD. Our next guest is Brenda Earle. Now, in the jazz world, she's what you might consider a quadruple threat, because she sings, she plays piano, she composes, and she teaches. Basically, this woman is all about the jazz. Brenda grew up in Sarnia, Ontario, It's a small town in southwestern part of the province, but she ended up in New York City around 2001. She is a highly sought-after composer of jazz choral music, and she's a renowned instructor. In fact, she just finished teaching another summer program at the New York Summer Music Festival, where she was teaching both jazz piano and jazz vocal. She's always loved jazz music, but followed kind of a distinctly non-traditional path to get to where she is. So I asked her about that path because she found it in the late 90s performing on cruise ships. And this is just me imagining, right? But fun going to all sorts of neat places, but your repertoire must have just grown like crazy.
Oh, it exploded, and I guess the funniest thing about it was I was such a jazz person until I went on the ship. I really had, all the stuff that we were all into in high school. I was like big into the Ramones and Social Distortion and the Dead Kennedys and all like the stuff that we used to listen to together. And, I completely converted and only listened to jazz. I didn't own a television. I was completely disconnected from everything that was going on outside of my little world of jazz. And so I go out on the cruise ship and think that people are going to want to hear, Bud Powell covers. And it turns out that no, they do not want to hear that. They really don't.
That's pretty funny.
Well, I was so insulated from what was going on in the world, and I was just so into what I'm doing, which I'm glad. But I got out there and I basically got my butt kicked because people were coming in asking for Elton John songs, and I'm saying, well, wouldn't you rather hear, Giant Steps by John Coltrane? And they're like, no, we want to hear Elton John. So I think on my first contract I learned 200 or 300 songs. And I was playing 6 nights a week. Actually, on the first contract, I was playing 7 nights a week. I was playing 4 or 5 hours a day. My repertoire exploded. Up until that point, I'd never really sung on a regular basis. Singing was something that was relatively new. So just singing every night, getting in touch with my instrument in that way, learning to accompany myself better, learning to interact with people, figuring, just all that kind of stuff, just figuring out how to actually be a performer, because it's one thing to be locked in a practice room all day, but it's a very different thing to have to, put the face on, put the dress on, interact with people, entertain people. It was an incredible learning experience for me.
So Brenda, it really sounds to me like you've got 4 or 5 full-time jobs.
Yeah, I do have like 5 full-time jobs.
It kind of sounds like you're a busy woman.
Yeah, pretty much. It's it's kind of the nature of the beast in New York to have to be this busy. I'm really grateful that I am this busy, but I have a bunch of different skills. Like my skill set is pretty diverse. So initially coming to New York as a jazz piano player who sang a little bit, and then developing the singing stuff a lot more, and then getting really interested in pedagogy. So I've, gotten really interested in education and working with young people and working with people who have, a diverse set of needs. I teach for an organization of families of 9/11, and I work with somebody who has Asperger's syndrome, and I've taught people who are blind, and so that's a whole, kind of interest and a skill set of just educating people, and the choral work and the writing stuff, and it's just sort of a little bit of everything, I guess.
Why New York City? As opposed to any other city in the world, why are you in New York City?
I think New York has always been the mecca for jazz, and it always just kind of called on me. I had friends who I sort of came up with in Toronto who had, spent time in New York, and it was always kind of a mythical place for me. And so it just seemed like a good fit. And, I always felt like Sarnia was too small, and then I moved to Toronto, and then Toronto started feeling too small. And, so I figured New York would probably be a good fit. And after spending, after a week in New York, I went, this is definitely where I need to be. My brother's experience was different. He went on a whim to Copenhagen because he heard it was a cool place to go, and he fell in love with Copenhagen. Now, I love Copenhagen too, but I wouldn't want to live there, So I just think there was something about being here that spoke to me. And it was tough, it's a lonely city to be in when you don't know people, but it's also a very provincial place. So I spent a lot of time in my neighborhood, and a lot of people don't like my neighborhood, but I absolutely love it, and couldn't imagine ever leaving here. So it just kind of spoke to me.
You're working on a new album now, aren't you?
I finished recording it right before I left for the New York Summer Music Festival. So
okay.
I am now just starting to think about mixing it and preparing for the next step. Which I listened to it a couple of times this summer, but that's about it.
When do you expect to have something out there on store shelves?
I'm not really sure at this point. I would like to have something. I would like to have it finished by really early spring, maybe by March. But I'm starting to see what kind of record labels are interested, and I'm starting to shop it around a little bit and see what people are interested in doing with it. Because if I can put it out on a decent label, then I would consider doing it. Otherwise, I'll just release it on my own again.
And I mean, do you feel this is, or let me try and rephrase this. Where is this new one in the stage of your, I guess, performer evolution or songwriter evolution compared to Happening from 3 years ago?
I think this is the most personal one I've ever recorded, and it's super eclectic. I mean, there's a bunch of original music that I've written. There's some arrangements of material. It sounds very random, but it's very songs by a friend of mine named Christian Tamber, who's a great vibraphonist, and I wrote lyrics to one of his pieces, which was very meaningful to me. And Joel Fromm, who's a saxophonist on my last record, I wrote some lyrics to one of his songs that were very meaningful. Again, something that was very, very meaningful for me. There's a Crowded House tune on there. There's a song by the rock band Keane. There's a Mark Anthony tune on there that I sing in Spanish. So it's a very, very eclectic record of different things. But I feel like it's the most personal. And without sort of telling you everything that's happened in the last few years, it's a lot of, I think, songs of me having conversations with myself, or me having conversations, I guess, in a musical way with people that have had an effect on me in the last few years.
Without prying too much into your mental or personal life, what is really inspiring you, I guess, when you're writing these songs?
I think something happens when we turn 30.
Agreed.
I feel I turned 31. I'm turning 32 this year. Of course, you're going to print that I'm only 29 still, but
of course, yeah.
I'm just kidding. Now that I'm in my 30s, I think things are starting to really shift. I think that there's a self-knowledge that comes out of turning 30, and I guess it's been a few years since I've been in graduate school, and so much has just happened as far as my career and my personal life and knowing who I am, and my changing relationship with my family, and the people around me. I've been in New York for a lot longer now. I've been here for almost 7 years, and I think there's just been generally a shift, and I'm noticing it all over the place, and people who are very close to me are noticing it too, that there's just, it's like I'm kind of settling down a little bit. So I think that a lot of this is kind of just, the album is about processing a lot of those feelings.
That's interesting to hear you say. I'm 35 now, and I've had any number of conversations with my friends who've hit their 30s the last few years, and everybody says the same thing. It's like all the drama of your 20s, you just kind of go, that's it. I don't have time for that, or whatever. It just your mind seems to shift around 30, 31 for some reason.
It was so huge. It was pretty phenomenal, and I knew it. I remember sitting, with a Cosmopolitan in my hand on my 30th birthday, saying everything's going to change, and it really did.
sky. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this is happening to me.
Hi, this is Brenda Earle, and you're listening to The Ruckus on Rabble.ca.
Okay, thank you very much, Brenda. You can check out her website at www.brendaearle.com. And of course, speaking of .coms, you can check out our Ruckus blog as well. Go to www.canadianruckus.com and you can tell us what you think of the show, or feel free to make a suggestion on an artist or band of somebody we should feature on a future episode. Now we have one more stop to make on this, our first voyage of discovery around Canada, and we're going to end this episode in Toronto. Entire Cities is a band that's pretty hard to describe. They are, for all intents and purposes, a country band, but really that doesn't begin to explain what they sound like. They rely as much on kind of old-style country music as they do on folk or rock or whatever else they have kicking around their heads when they're jamming. I talked to the main man behind Entire Cities, a guy named Simon Borer, about what it's like to be in a band that can have anywhere from 5 to 12 members, but we also talked about PodSafe music and some interesting props that they had at their CD release party earlier this year.
In the darkened halls of the angelic infirmary, I found.
So I was reading about one article about your CD release party that happened earlier this year.
Yeah.
And something about you getting trampolines for the show. Did you have trampolines at your CD release party?
We did, and I was I just went on Craigslist and found 2 of like small kid-sized trampolines. You know, the ones that are about 4 feet across, something like that.
Yeah.
And it worked out really well because I was a little bit worried either that people would think that they were goofy and nobody would use them, or that, you know, people would collide into each other in midair and just all kinds.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, like, did they have to sign a waiver on their way in when they do that? What did this trampoline come with? Some kind of insurance policy?
No, they were actually pretty rusty on the bottom too. We're all poor enough that we're not really worried about getting sued.
Right.
And no, they actually got used safely and responsibly throughout the whole night. I was pretty happy about that.
So is this like an assistance for stage diving, or is this just somebody wants to bounce up and down, like?
Just just a place to get some excess energy out, or if you're you know, a little on the short side and you can't quite crowd up to the front of the stage, you can always catch a glimpse of whoever's on stage. Yeah, that whole night was just really wonderful for us. You know, we had some of our favorite musicians in the world playing with us that night. It was in a Legion Hall down at King of Niagara, and yeah, that whole night was fantastic and relatively injury free.
Almost, I don't know if it's a movement or of big bands and a lot of, you know, trading of members and swapping instruments. Like you've got, you know, Arcade Fire, Broken Social Scene. In Ottawa, there's a great band called Jet Planes of Abraham. That kind of follow the same mode. Is this like a new thing in rock music, do you think? Because, you know, I grew up with, you know, Aerosmith or whatever. They had like the same 5 guys for 30 years, and, you know, you play bass and you play drums, and that's it. So I mean, what's happening there?
It all depends who you're talking to. I think pop music the last, you know, 20 or 30 years, there's definitely been you know, a focus on you know, the 3-piece, the 4-piece, that kind of thing. But if you know, sit down and watch the movie Nashville, the Robert Altman movie, there's 20 or 30 people in every band. You know, if you watch James Brown, he's got 30 people behind him. I think, and this is just my theory, but I think as in the last couple of years, there definitely has been that in especially in Canadian music, you know, with the Arcade Fire and Broken Social Scene being the 2 big examples. I think number one, gas prices have gone up, so people aren't thinking of touring as much, so they're staying close to home, and 2, because music is so freely available on the internet, like we were talking about, the focus has gone back to the live show in a way that maybe wasn't there before, and it can be pretty stunning to watch. You know, 10 musicians making this giant, you know, orchestra-like wall of sound that you really can't reproduce on a CD.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I think of it like, you know, old jazz bands or something like that too, right? You've got a lot of people or just different people showing up for a session.
Yeah.
And God knows what it's going to sound like, so it can be different night to night, right?
Well, it's true. And living in a place like Toronto where there's so many musicians and so many different kinds of musicians, it seems almost foolish to say, you know, okay, guitar, bass, drums, that's enough, you know, when you've got classically trained violinists and jazz musicians and all these different people just wandering around Toronto. You'd be foolish not to invite them to come jam with you. The PodSafe network has actually been really good to us. It's given us a bunch of exposure, and I found out about it just because I was listening to podcasts, and they'd always say, you know, the music today is from the PodSafe Music Network, and so I signed up. It's a great little tool for musicians to get out there to people that they wouldn't necessarily be exposed to otherwise. Well, it's a neat thing. Like I'm really interested in copyright and stuff like that, and I want our music to be available to anybody who wants to hear it. But at the same time, like almost as soon as the record went on iTunes, all of a sudden there were like Russian and Chinese sites that had it for free for download. And what really frustrated me about that was the sound quality was terrible. It was like 32K or something like that. And so it wasn't just, you know, potential revenue being taken away from us. It was us being represented in a way that I wasn't comfortable being represented in. And so the PodSafe network is kind of the opposite of that. It's, you know, giving your music away to people who are going to use it in a non-commercial way. They're going to help promote you. You know, it's not just for download. Yeah, I think it's great.
I mean, what's happened in the last 10 years? I mean, the industry's been turned on its head, right? So, I mean, all of a sudden, you know, Napster, everybody's downloading all the Metallica songs. Lars is getting pissed off. But at the same time, a lot of bands have kind of been discovered through file sharing. So, I mean, how do you find a happy medium in all that?
Well, it's funny. To bring up podcasts again, Slate Magazine just ran a podcast about what they call the long tail of digital media, which is the amount of media content that people are exposed to is getting bigger and bigger with digital media. You know, it used to be that there were, you know, 5 radio stations and 10 big records every year that everybody bought, you know, Fleetwood Mac or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
And now there's all this niche marketing and stuff. So you still do have some big stars, but if you're not one of those big stars, the sort of moderate celebrity is distributed much more widely. Unfortunately, the spending patterns haven't changed to reflect that. So the spending patterns still go to the big guys, and the little guys still don't really make any money. And it's been funny for us to see our music go to places it never could have gone 10 years ago. You know, you know, Google the band and then have to use the translator because there's you know, reviews from Holland and Russia and stuff like that. But at the same time, we're still a long way off from quitting our day jobs. You know what I mean?
Well, folks, that was the first episode of The Ruckus on the Rabble Podcast Network. I hope you liked it. Make sure you check out our blog at CanadianRuckus.com for updates on future episodes, which should be coming roughly every month. You can also leave a comment, make a suggestion, all that normal blog stuff all you web-savvy music lovers are used to. For more great Rabble music, though, check out Rabble TV and their Indie Inside feature. Every couple of weeks, there's a new Canadian artist featured, so you can watch great indie music videos. That's on tv.rabble.ca. A big thanks goes out to Megan Perry at Rabble headquarters, and a big thanks also to our artists, Entire Cities, Brenda Earle, and Rebekah Higgs. Make sure you go buy their CDs, go see their shows, and keep supporting Canadian music. Next time on The Ruckus, we'll be heading back to Toronto, but fear not, this is not just a Toronto show. We will be heading off to Ottawa as well, and we're going to head way out to the west coast to visit Vancouver and a certain legendary punk band that you just might recognize. Anyway, I'll leave it a secret for now. We'll see you next time on The Ruckus.